We are the most overstimulated, overworked, overstressed culture. All of these things are tied to illness. Alzheimer's, dementia, all of these different degenerative issues are crazy, rampant, on the rise.
Meet Angie Noak and Rachel Lambert, pioneers of brain mapping, mental performance, and the future of neurofeedback.
How did you get into your fascination for the brain?
I ended up getting arrested more than 1 or 2 times, unfortunately. And I'll never forget sitting in this jail cell and just like praying to God, if you could please just get me out of this situation. I promise that I'll get my life back together and I'll start over and I'll start doing good again.
I suffered a skull fracture, traumatic brain injury, and neurofeedback was a big part of that story.
What is neurofeedback?
It's like the gym, but for your best asset.
The brain is always neuroplastic. It's always willing to heal. It just doesn't know yet.
You can have a Ferrari and you can have a Kia. It's 2 completely different experiences of a drive. And that's the way that we see brains, right? There are people that have faster, more powerful brains. There's also people that have a little bit of a slower brain.
Why is this like not public knowledge and why is it not so popular? Before we get into this epic interview, I have one quick ask. Well, we've had the privilege of reaching millions of people on the show. The data shows that almost 80% of you guys who watch the show aren't yet subscribed. So if you could do me one quick favor and click that subscribe button right now, it would mean the absolute world to us. Because when you hit subscribe, not only are you allowing us to grow the show, get bigger guests, ask better questions, but you're allowing us to honor our commitment to do everything in our power to help you take your life, your business, your health, your relationships to that next level. And with no further ado, enjoy the show. Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Passionate Few podcast. Today we have an epic interview as we're going to be delving into the brain. And today we have on none other than Angie Noak and Rachel Lambert to talk all about brain code centers and how you can optimize your brain today. So with no further ado, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. So before we delve into the brain, there's so much to it. You guys obviously run brain code centers, helping people with neurofeedback in the mind. And for a lot of the audience, they might not know this, right? We all have a brain. It powers our whole system. But first and foremost, what do you guys do at brain code centers? And then we'll delve into kind of how you guys got here today and geek out on the brain. But what is brain code centers for people who want to optimize their mental performance?
Absolutely. So we specialize in brain mapping and neurofeedback. A quantitative electroencephalogram or a QEEG brain map is a way of actually looking at the organ that you're treating, right? Because traditional clinical mental health is just assessing the symptoms. We like to actually look at the root cause of where that's stemming from. So we specialize in brain mapping. With that, then we create tailored treatment plans for our clientele, and we utilize neurofeedback to help their brain actually rewire itself through a series of reward-based training.
And what is a brain map for people who don't know what that is? They've seen x-rays of the brain, maybe they've heard of it loosely, but what is a brain map for somebody who knows zero?
Yes, a brain map looks at the electrical activity that the brain organically produces. So we're looking at wave activity. It's completely non-invasive, where we're actually going to place a cap over our clients' heads, filled up with a little bit of gel, and then we take a recording. We're not trying to evoke emotion, and this is not a stress test, right? So we're just looking at the activity, similar to an EKG of a heartbeat or an ultrasound of a body part. It's just a measuring tool. With that information, we're able to look at clinical patterns. So we can see, even without somebody telling us, if they struggle with anxiety, depression, ADHD, migraines, or maybe have a history of concussions. That's all completely evident on a QEEG brain map.
And how did you guys get into any of this? Because I know you guys are obviously partners in the business and helping people with it. You guys both had an origin story each with some trauma. How did that sort of start for each of you guys?
Absolutely. So yeah, I met Rachel probably 10 years ago now, but prior to that, growing up, honestly, I was kind of an underachiever, didn't, care a lot about school or grades or things like that. And about halfway through college, I actually had an accident where I suffered a skull fracture, traumatic brain injury. Wow. And it honestly, my life kind of started there rather than, Western medicine definitely did something for me and helped with my healing. It was more natural medicine that I actually honestly got so much better and truly healed. And neurofeedback was a big part of that story. So I was in a walker for a while, intensive care unit, all the things. And kind of even several years down the road when I got into neurofeedback, I had some pretty severe anxiety, still some cognitive deficits. And neurofeedback was a way to really patch some of those things that were still left even years down the road. So now when we work with professional athletes, football players who are 20 years out and going, is this as good as it's going to get, right? That, am I still capable of healing? The brain is always neuroplastic. It's always willing to heal. It just doesn't know yet. So yeah, neurofeedback truly impacted my life incredibly.
What was that first trauma? How old were you?
Yeah, I was 19. It sounds like, was it a car accident? No. I was home for the summer from college. I went to donate blood and I passed out when I left, and I fell on linoleum over cement and it fractured the occipital plate in my skull. Wow. And so I just had some pretty significant issues from that. I didn't actually make it to the hospital until like 12 hours later. So a lot of swelling had happened. So that was the accident.
And then neurofeedback, what is that for the audience that doesn't know? I know we talked about brain mapping, but what is neurofeedback for people who first time heard that term?
Totally. So the actual brain map really is kind of our guide, right? It helps direct us exactly to know what's happening. There are types of neurofeedback where people don't do a brain map. A brain map is how we are going to direct your treatment. So rather than kind of generalized protocols, anxiety, here's a protocol. Anxiety can come from 50 different patterns in the brain. We need to know exactly what's happening, right? Mental health psychology is actually the only field of medicine that we don't measure the organ that we're going to treat. Would you go in for knee surgery if they were like, we're not going to take a scan. We're just going to see what's up when we get in there. Please don't do that. Let's find out what's going on. That's our QEEG. The actual neurofeedback is operant conditioning of the brain. It's reward-based training. We're literally teaching the brain to create new neural pathways to serve that person better. A lot of people call it rewiring the brain.
And why do so few people measure the brain? Why do you guys think that's the case?
I personally think it's just a lack of education. Still, just the main treatment is you assess symptoms, right? So somebody comes in, maybe you do some sort of written tests, and then you can diagnose somebody with ADD or depression or something like that. But I don't think many people know that you can actually look at the brain. I do believe a lot of people see maybe SPECT images done. Dr. Amen love a SPECT image. However, a SPECT image is going to be a lot more invasive, right? You're having to get an IV and there's radioactive material. And so if you're maybe a kid and you're a parent and you don't know if your kid could sit through with that, it's also a pretty high price point, right? So some people can't afford to go get a SPECT image. So I think when people think brain mapping, they think of this big, robust MRI or a huge machine, whereas a QEEG is so much more simple and digestible, and we can even, do it from the comfort of somebody's home. So I just think it's a lack of education, and that's probably the biggest reason why.
When is the right time for someone to take a look at it? Because intuitively, I imagine men or women listening to this are probably thinking, okay, that's cool, but maybe I need to have a trauma first, right, in order for me to look at it, right? More reactive than proactive, whereas a lot of traditional, medicine practices are sort of starting to prove that the more you can get ahead of the puck, now you can have sort of leverage to enhance the mind, the body, etc. But when do you think is the right time for someone to start studying the brain? Because most people wait until a trauma, until an accident, until maybe they're out of a sport that they had injury in. So when is the right time if someone feels like their brain is perfectly healthy to, what would be the motive essentially?
Angie and I work with a lot of 1%ers, right? Professional athletes, executives, CEOs of companies. These people are looking for ways to level up and optimize their brain's performance. Now, they might have gotten a taste of brain mapping and neurofeedback somewhere, so they learned about it. But the real answer is everybody has a brain. And why are you not trying to optimize your best asset? Now, I totally understand that for some people, it's a time and or investment thing. And so you have to almost get to a place of suffering where then you're finally like, okay, now my brain is handing me the bill. But if you can actually create neuroplasticity, neuroflexibility, and create a more resilient mind, it's going to enable you to go so much farther in life, or be able to handle stress so much better when it does come across your table. And so, of course, Angie and I are biased, but everybody should be training your brain. It's like the gym, but for your best asset. So if you know that you can create better strength, better flexibility, and better endurance of your actual brain, why would you not want to take advantage of that?
We also see a lot of misdiagnosis. So people come in, I have ADD, I have depression, I have anxiety, and I take a med for this and a med for this and a med for this. And then we actually look at the brain. those things are not disconnected. All of those things are very interconnected within the brain. So ADD, ADHD is probably the most misdiagnosed thing that I see. It is like one specific pattern in the brain, which is actually a slow pattern. It's excess theta wave activity, which is the second to slowest wave. That is why Adderall, Ritalin are stimulants, because they speed the brain up so that that person can focus. 90% of the kids that I see with that diagnosis actually have overactivity in the brain of fast wave. So you have a fast brain that we're adding a stimulant to. Probably going to be an issue. So also if somebody, you know, if you're on meds and you're questioning, right? Well, yeah, I've been through all these different meds and they don't work, or actually, you know, I have all these side effects. That would be a great time to, hey, let's do a QEEG. Let's actually know what's going on versus I filled out a 20 question questionnaire and then was prescribed X. I also believe in baseline tools. If you have a 10-year-old who you know wants to play football, let's do a baseline map right now so that when they experience some concussions, we know where they were so we know where they're at now. So honestly, I think do a brain map just for your information, just so you know what's happening in your brain now.
I love that. And then how about for you, Rachel? How did you get into it too? Because I know Angie shared a little bit of her traumatic incident at 19. How about yourself? How did you get into your fascination for the brain?
Yes. So growing up, I had a lovely family system, very supportive parents. But my mom will tell you to this day, I remember, Rachel, when I would tell you from a young age, don't go pick those flowers. And the first thing I do is head over staring at her with eyes of deviance. I'm picking the flowers.
Yes.
And as funny as that is, right? Middle school, it started involving more drug usage, hanging out with horrible people. High school, that dominoed and got worse. I was abusing alcohol, abusing drugs, very, very incredibly impulsive. My behavior was so out of sync with the environment that I was in that it started to push past just normal teenage rebellion.
Yeah.
I ended up getting arrested more than the 1 or 2 times, unfortunately.
No way.
And I'll never forget sitting in this jail cell and just like praying to God, if you could please just get me out of this situation, I promise that I'll figure it out. I'll get my life back together and I'll start over and I'll start doing good again. And then it wouldn't happen. I would end up in some sort of just dysfunction or impulsive decision again. And I went back to jail, got out, and finally my parents sat me down and they asked me a very simple question. It was, Rachel, do you think before you act? Do you think before you act? And I know how simple that is, but that question changed the whole trajectory of my life because I was not thinking before I was acting, right? I was just paying for the repercussions on the other side. That question began the exploration of what can we do to help our daughter and help her get in control of her brain health.
Wow.
I didn't want to be on medication and feel reliant on that. Maybe that was the stubborn side of me. And I had tried traditional talk therapy and it just wasn't proving to be effective. Now, I am a licensed professional counselor, as is Angie. So we do believe in the power of traditional talk therapy. Sometimes that's not enough. And for me, that was the case. So I ended up going and finding out about this woohoo brain mapping and neurofeedback thing, had nothing to lose, gave it a try.
How much was it? Do you remember?
Back in the day, I did it many, many years ago. I think they paid like $1,500 for my brain map.
Okay.
We charge almost half of that at our in-person clinics and even less if it's a remote client. So I think it's been able to be more mainstream even to this point. But I did that brain map and essentially I met with the doctor and my results showed a pattern of bipolar, which to Angie's point was so eye-opening for me to actually understand what was going on. It provided a lot of validation, but also a visual form of grace for myself and my family. Your frontal cortex, right, when it's moving 150 miles an hour, it doesn't matter how much willpower you have. You are going to feel out of control. And that was my case. Like my frontal lobe was just a Ferrari, no brakes headed down the highway. I ended up doing a whole series of neurofeedback. It took me about 4 or 5 months to do all of the sessions that I needed to do. At the end of it, I did a second brain map. The results showed not one clinical pattern of bipolar disorder.
Wow.
And it wasn't just that, like for the first time ever, I felt in control of my own health. I felt in control of my mood, of my decisions. My parents told me that they felt like they had the best version of their daughter back, and it saved my life. So I was like, oh my gosh, This is what I want to do. More people need to know that you can actually change your brain. So I changed my major by the grace of God, got into college, did all of the certifications to do what I do now. And I just was determined that I wanted to have one of the most successful neurofeedback practices. And we're so grateful that we do have one of the largest and most successful practices in the country.
That's fascinating. So when you first had that issue and then you sort of started to right away realize, whoa, I can actually look at it. I think most people never take inventory of their brain. And so you don't know what you don't know. So you just kind of keep thinking, oh, let me get better. Let me go to therapy. Let me read a book, not realizing that there's chemistry involved. That's really fascinating. What's a quick question, and we can dive into this. What's the most fascinating thing you guys have learned about the brain that was maybe unexpected? Maybe in terms of parts of the brain. You know, we talked about the frontal lobe being a Ferrari. A lot of people might have heard medulla oblongata or these things, you know, in high school or college you learn, and then it ends there. What's the most fascinating thing you guys have learned about parts of the brain or the way the brain works that maybe most people have no clue?
My first thought is just of the idea of plasticity, and people don't really know what that means. Like, what's neuroplasticity? Maybe I've heard it on an Andrew Huberman podcast, love Andrew Huberman, but like, what actually is that? And if you think about flexibility of the mind, right? We all move in and out of these different physiological states all throughout the day without us even being conscious of it, right? Maybe you had a really stressful day and you get home from work and you're having trouble falling asleep. Well, guess what? Your brain is still stuck going 60 to 70 miles an hour, yet you're asking your brain to downshift and move down into like 20, 30 miles an hour so that you can then fall asleep, turn off the car. But that's not happening for you. And the fact that people do not understand that you can actually increase neuroplasticity if you train your brain to be more flexible is as one of the most simplistic, like mind-blowing things that I think we work in. It's just neuroplastic. Your brain is neuroplastic. Like Angie was saying, it's willing to change. You just have to give it a catalyst in which to change. So I love neuroplasticity.
Yeah, and a structure and a format, right? Like similar to like a workout where it's like, okay, you do it's tangible. It's not like, oh, just go into the gym and work out. It's like, okay, let's learn your body mass index. What's your body fat? What are the areas you want to improve? Where do you want to go? Where are you currently? And then a plan in place. Most people don't have that. Yeah.
No.
It's true.
And honestly, I think that people just don't even know that it's available to them as a society. Even if you're high achieving, even if you're a biohacker, you're doing all the things. Generally, you're focusing pretty heavy neck down. I eat right, I work out, I try to, I sleep well, I do all these things. Your brain, it's not a muscle, it's an organ, but it works like a muscle. It can be flexed, it can be changed, it can be trained. And truly, when we tell people and we talk about it, it is mind-blowing to them, and it was mind-blowing to me. I thought that I was beholden to what I had. I thought that I was, I'm just kind of an underachiever. Maybe I'm just kind of, maybe I'm lazy. Maybe I'm whatever. I didn't know that I could harness the power of my brain. I didn't know that my brain was able to change. And through, now for me, it was through, a life-threatening injury that I had to change my brain, and my brain did change, and I got it together. And honestly, I'm a very different person now. People don't know that they're capable of that. They think they're beholden to what they're born with, and we're not. That your brain is absolutely capable of change.
Yeah. And what are the parts of the brain for the average person who doesn't know? Like if they wanted a refresher, I know there's so much to it, but in short, what are the basic components of the brain from an anatomy perspective, just so people can get a high level understanding?
I mean, you have your prefrontal cortex, your occipital lobe, your parietal lobe, your temporal lobe. You have your amygdala, your hypothalamus. So there's many different aspects of the brain, and we get those questions. What are we working on today? Are we working on
my hypothalamus?
Well, we don't have people amygdala today. Like that, definitely people don't ask that, but they do. Are we just working on anxiety today? And then we break down, okay, and we're big on education with clientele. We're not necessarily working on anxiety today because anxiety is not coming from just one place in your brain. We're working on the parietal lobe today. The parietal lobe, it controls more overthinking, catastrophizing, ruminating, or hey, we're working on this area that's more short-term memory. So it's not that we're just working on one thing. We're going to move around the brain as, again, when it comes to medication, I can't tell a Xanax, only go to the hypothalamus. That's it. It goes in and it floods, and maybe it helps this a little bit. Okay, but then we also have side effects because we can't direct it exactly where to go. Neurofeedback is so tailored. It's so specific. So we do not have side effects like medication because it doesn't work like medication.
Hey guys, we'll get right back to this video in a sec. But first, I have a quick question for you. Given that the e-commerce industry is growing by the trillions year over year, have you ever dreamed of owning your own e-commerce business like many of the guests we've had on the show, but maybe you feel stuck on how to start? Well, if so, you're not alone. The truth is, starting and setting up your own online store can be incredibly time-consuming, complicated, and get expensive. Not to mention the hassle of researching top products and staying on top of market trends that make you money. Lucky for you, that's where today's sponsor, StoreBuild.ai, comes in. With StoreBuild.ai, you instantly get a free custom-built, AI-driven store loaded with 20 winning products and a custom theme that can help you generate sales. All you need to do is head to StoreBuild.ai, enter your info, then simply sign up to Shopify for free, choose your store's look and feel, and voila! They'll send you your custom-built store ready to generate sales. The whole process is lightning fast. Whether you're just starting out or want to grow, StoreBuild.ai makes launching an online store easier than ever. So why wait? Visit StoreBuild.ai and in less than 5 minutes, you could have the e-commerce business you've always dreamed of. Thanks to StoreBuild.ai for sponsoring this video. And now let's get back to the show.
One of the things that comes to mind is almost like a Rubik's Cube, right? Where just because you solve one side, it doesn't mean that the other sides don't get messed up. And so what you guys do is more sort of make sure you get all the sides right instead of just people are like, oh, I have this issue, you solve that, but then it's a mess everywhere else, right?
Yeah, then you take this med for the side effect of this med for the side. And that's absolutely what we're trying to avoid. That at the end of the day, your brain is capable of doing it on its own. It just doesn't know how yet. It has to be taught like anything else. If I tomorrow wanted to wake up and know Spanish, that would be a feat. Probably not something that I can do.
Yeah.
I have to learn how to do that. But for some reason, we have this idea, I will mind over matter. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm no longer going to struggle with anxiety. Hey, I have a really hard issue. Focus and motivation. But tomorrow, better than that. And then, that doesn't happen and we get frustrated. Honestly, a lot of the things that we do are more like software updates on a computer. We learn to meditate. We, we take supplements. Those are all very beautiful things. If we have a hardware issue that we're trying to update with a software update, it's never going to touch that. We have to, at some point, address the hardware. That's neurofeedback.
So when you guys say work on the brain, what's an example of exercises like in a tangible, practical context? Just example that someone could use to work on, one particular ailment or whatever it is, just to contextualize it to the audience.
So one of our favorite things is breath work, and there's so many different types of breath work, but our two lungs are probably one of the most underutilized superpowers that we all have at our disposal. And so if you have not made breath work a daily wellness staple, you are missing out. A couple of our favorites, we love box breathing. Now, I do think box breathing is a little bit harder to do and it's a little bit more advanced, but it's where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and then hold for 4. You do that for 2 or 3 minutes, you will disrupt the stress signals in your brain and bring yourself down out of a state of stress. A diaphragmatic breath work is another awesome one. That's where you are going to inhale, hold, and then a really long exhale, almost out of a straw. That one's a lot better, I think, for even anxiety. It's easier for people to do.
What does it look like when you guys map it out? Have you guys seen it under a map?
Like what happens to the EEG?
Yeah, what actually happens to the brain when you do breath work?
When we map you right after this, Omar will show you. You can physiologically see wave activity change right there and then when somebody's doing breath work. You can also see, and we'll show you on the screen, when you get tense or tighten your jaw or you start to stress yourself out, your brain waves are going to shift automatically. Wow. So people sometimes, because you can't see the brain, you can't see your own wave activity, you don't understand how powerful everything that you do on a day-to-day basis impacts them. So yes, breath work can change your EEG. Now, this is a question we get all the time. Okay, well, I meditate every single day. So why then do I still struggle managing my own stress? This is where neurofeedback comes in, right? Where you can actually reward the brain for a meditative state so you can change the default mode network of the brain. So that now becomes the new mode of operation versus just putting yourself into a nice physiological state.
What would rewarding it look like, for example?
Well, that's where that neurofeedback comes in. So people ask that all the time, like, well, I do breath work. And back to Angie's like hardware versus software, we absolutely believe that breath work can be powerful and you can change your physiology in that moment. But how do you get it to stick? That's where that reward has to come in. And that's via the neurofeedback. But we can talk more in more detail about neurofeedback. But breathwork is a huge tool that we love. Bilateral stimulation tapping. Have you heard of EMDR? Mm-hmm. So if you haven't heard of EMDR, it's a counseling technique, but it utilizes bilateral stimulation reward, where you're getting to connect the right and the left hemisphere together. So if you actually are in a state of stress, maybe you're in a meeting or your kids are driving you nuts or whatever, you can actually tap bilaterally on the right and the left hemisphere of your body. This helps your two hemispheres start to get in communication with one another again. You can also do it here on your chest, and that will, really disrupt any sort of stress that you're holding, bring you down into a state of sympathetic. So those are some of our personal favorite too.
The cool part too is that a lot of people might hear this stuff and go, well, I've never seen it, right? Seeing it is believing. It's really interesting. Like, why do people not? Like, why is there not brain clinics on every corner? Or, you know what I mean? Like, what in your guys' research and time looking at this, why is this like not public knowledge, and why is it not so popular?
Oh my gosh, we get those questions all the time. If this is the best thing ever, why aren't people doing it?
Right.
And there is no shame in the medication game, right? We do what we got to do. I firmly believe that. We are a society that is dependent on medication. That's just the reality. If you go to a doctor, there is a med for everything. Hey, that med didn't work. I got 50 more. Let's try them, right? So that's the reality. And our insurance covers meds. It's not hard to take a couple of pills every single day. It's going to take a whole lot more work to go into, our offices, or we have a fully remote program to put your headset on a couple times a week. That's the difference, is that, it's just not mainstream yet. Now it's becoming significantly more. I believe that in the last 10 years, there's been a significant shift towards wanting more natural, towards asking more questions, towards, man, I've been on benzos for 20 years. I don't feel so great. That's causing all of these other things. What else is there? And that's our mission. That's where we want to have impact. Not to say that every single person has to do neurofeedback, but to put it in the conversation that, okay, for mental health, let's say there's meds, there's counseling, there's also neurofeedback treatment. But that's honestly why that generally, when we ask questions at doctors' offices, of which we trust, which we should, that's kind of what we're pushing is medication. There's a med for everything. Big pharma is very, very real. Ozempic versus going to the gym. It's a lot harder. It takes a lot more time. It takes a lot more effort to go to the gym. Why does everybody love Ozempic? Because I can, take a little shot every week and I lose weight. Neurofeedback is going to the gym, but it also has long-term permanent change because you're teaching your brain a new skill versus it does not have a shelf life in the body or in the brain.
Yeah, and most importantly, it's measurable, right?
That's
And
right.
when you don't measure, it can't get better.
Proof of change.
I think so many people just wing it on their brain. I'm even thinking now as we're talking, think about how many people, billions of people have lived their whole life. They've gotten maybe x-rays, checkups, they do the physical once a year. But how often have they looked at the brain or even thought to ask that it was even a possibility to look at the brain? Mm-hmm. That's crazy. And yet it powers so much of what we do.
Oh my gosh.
Nonstop.
As we talked about earlier, right? You would not go in for surgery if no one had done a scan
Right.
in any, right? We would just never do that. Hey, we're just going to cut you open and, see what happens and we'll figure it out once we get there. But we go to the doctor's office, we fill out a questionnaire and we're prescribed a medication and we do not question that.
Right.
People don't even know that, hey, why don't we do a brain scan? Even if you want a med, even if you are committed to being on medication, do a brain scan. Let's figure out your neurochemistry and exactly what your brain needs and what it would pair best with versus a cycle of medication that could take years to actually find a med that would pair with your brain.
Yeah, most people don't have any sort of reference point.
That's right.
They don't have a reference point. Their parents didn't. So where are they going to learn? Except if they listen to stuff like this or get educated on it.
Yeah.
Now, what about this in terms of neurofeedback? How would you explain it to an eighth grader in layman's terms? Right. The average person, they take a look at their brain. They see where they're strong, maybe where deficiencies are, maybe certain patterns. But what is neurofeedback explained to an eighth grader in terms of applicable use to make their brain stronger, better, faster, sharper, et cetera?
We like to use the analogy of Pavlov's dog. So some people, no clue what that is. You'll learn about it in your Psychology 101 course, but basic learned behaviors. We have learned behaviors for everything. Walking, talking, eating, riding a bike, driving a car. Not an eighth grader yet, but you learn those skills, you commit them to permanency, and then you never think about them ever again. You wake up and you don't have to relearn how to walk. And so
Tie a shoe.
we're capable of learning all of these things, but I think the older we get, we stop that learning that we immerse ourselves in. So if I was speaking to an 8th grader, I would really be asking them, like, do you remember learning how to walk? No, you probably don't. But you do probably remember that your parents weren't giving you a direction manual and having you read that in which to walk. No. What they were doing, though, is they were rewarding you. Every time you stood up as a baby and tried to walk, they would get excited and, clap and say, good job, buddy, you're almost there. You got it. That reward helped wire that person's brain. And so just like Pavlov's dog, where you can create a ideal learned behavior, right? And Pavlov's dog, essentially, there was a scientist, he wanted to figure out, could I get this dog to produce saliva at the sound of a bell? So he would ring the bell, he would give the dog a treat, a piece of filet mignon, let's say, and then he did that so many times that he took the treat away, dog still produced saliva when he heard the sound of the bell. So there was association made there that was positive. That is what neurofeedback does, is we reward the brain when it produces a desirable wave output. So for example, let's say your brain is producing way too much excess stress waves, like a high beta brainwave where you're going to feel overactive, overthinking, impulsive, angry, etc.
Can't sleep, whatever. Yeah.
So we're going to set a threshold that only is going to reward your brain if it falls within a desirable pattern. Okay. Now you're not consciously thinking that, much like a baby's not consciously thinking about putting his right foot and then his left foot in front of one another. But your brain is going to hit it for you. Right when it does, you see and hear auditory and visual reward on our app or in one of our clinics. And then your brain starts to learn, oh, I get reward every time I hit that. Over the course of time, your brain learns how to self-regulate. So back again to the 8th grader, I would just be talking about the fact that you can learn how to throw a ball. You can learn how to do a math question. You could learn how to ride a bike. Like, you don't question any of those, but you do it with practice and repetition and practice and repetition until you learn that skill. And now you don't have to ride your bike every week just to remember how to do that skill.
And can people create reward feedback mechanisms, obviously with the clinic, with you guys and what you guys help them with at your guys' centers, but can they also do that in private at home? Like, what are some ways they can reward themselves once they learn that? Or is there any sort of way to do that?
So the actual treatment that we do does happen in office or with our remote program, right? It happens during the neurofeedback versus there's not necessarily a way to, because it's happening on a passive level is probably the best way that I can say it.
Right.
I think you're thinking about more of a thought-based level, right? That I am thought-based rewarding myself when I do something. I actually see Atomic Habits, on your shelf. That absolutely, right? If we want to learn to create a habit to go to the gym, we put on our shoes, we reward ourselves, yes, I went to the gym, that creates dopamine, good feelings, all the thing. That's again, thought-based, that's software. We really have to get into the hardware. So this is not something that while you're doing the neurofeedback, you're cognitively thinking about what's happening, because ultimately you could wake up tomorrow and be like, I'm going to have the best day ever. If you're somebody who struggles with anxiety, no anxiety today. I'm going to feel so fantastic. No matter what happens, it's going to be the best. Then you go to work and your boss calls and, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired. I know, what the heck? Actually, nothing has happened. Why am I having these thoughts? This catastrophizing, this overthinking. You did not think that was a automatic neuro pathway. Similarly to when you wake up in the morning, you don't think, all right, legs engage, let's friggin' do this. Your legs already know what to do. So we're not training your thoughts, we're training your automatic wave activity. So yes, you do reward yourself at home. Every single time you pop on Instagram, your brain is flooded with dopamine, reward stimulus, lights and sounds and action. That's not cognitive, that's happening passively. So I think that's probably the difference is, yes, you do reward yourself at home and you can do that with habitry. You're not going to do that necessarily with the automatic type of neurological patterns we're talking about.
Similar to kind of what you're mentioning about the dog, right? Like the dog can't train itself. It needs something above it that can sort of see its behavior to sort of course correct it. And then it becomes automatic for him on autopilot. That makes a lot of sense.
That's right.
Hey guys, quick question. Have you been enjoying this video, but you're thinking to yourself, man, I love this content, but I want to learn how to grow my brand or my business? Well, if your answer is yes, you're not alone. In fact, millions of entrepreneurs deal with this exact same issue. And it's something that I've learned the answer to from interviewing 7, 8, and 9-figure entrepreneurs around the world. And this philosophy that solves all that is a concept called who, not how. Now, the who, not how philosophy states that anytime you're stuck on the hows to get to the next level in your life, your brand, or your business, that there's always a who to help you get there. And it's for this exact reason that I'm super excited to announce that I've officially launched our brand new Passionate Few community to help you do exactly that. And yes, it's 100% free. Join me and the thousands of other entrepreneurs that can help you make your life, your business, and your dreams a reality. With no further ado, let's get back to the video.
How did you guys meet? You guys both have this fascination with the brain. I'm curious. You guys have joined forces.
Yeah, so we actually met professionally, so many years ago when I was actually in my master's program, I had a professor who just he was pretty brain-based, and he knew my story and was like, I love counseling, I love clinical mental health, but about a year and a half into my master's, I was like, oh no, I'm going to just listen to people's feelings. So I had, kind of that crisis moment where I was like, what am I doing? And he introduced me to a colleague that we had at the time. And honestly, Rachel and I met, and if you know, and that was it. We met and have been soulmates ever since, and got to know each other professionally, started working together. And actually, it was probably, I would say, a year into when we were working together. Rachel was at a clinic, I was at a clinic. I was seeing clients 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. And she had asked me several times to hang out. And I was so tunnel vision that I was like, maybe someday, I would just ignore the text. Finally, Rachel is a very bold personality, as am I. She called me and she was like, do you not want to be my friend? I was like, oh, she goes, well, you've not responded like 5 times to when I've asked you to hang out. And I was like, I am so, and for no intentional reason, she just called me out. And then I think we went to dinner, a while later, and have been honestly best friends ever since. Everywhere we go, we get the question, are you two sisters? We also get the question, are you twins? Which I think maybe it's because we're blonde white women. But we get the question all the time. And
one of my favorite things about Angie is I'll never forget just the trust that she has in me, and then in the company and the mission that we have, right? She had asked me, right, because we have a career and we had goals as young professionals. And she was like, here's my goal that I want to be making financially so I can pay off all my student loans and stuff like that. And it was a pretty lofty number. And I was like, let's do it. Let's do this together. This is how we're going to work backwards. And this was, like I said, it was just me and her. And we hired our first employee. And then now we have 60 employees, and we have 8 clinics in 3 different states and a global remote program. So we have employees all over the nation. And I just love that she took a leap of faith, but it is deep rooted in the mission of impact, right? We know what we do and what we offer works so substantially that the masses need it. And we haven't even really had to promote much of what we've done, because you get better and we help your kid with their anxiety or their ADHD, or you have crippling migraines and you can't function anymore. And then you're going to go tell your 10 best friends. And that is the heartbeat of how Brain Code Centers has grown. But that's one of my favorite things about Angie is we've just gone on the waves together, and we're best friends, but also really, really great in business together. And that is a very unique thing to be able to go back and forth between.
Yeah, and with the shared passion for it too, it's like you guys bounce off each other too. It's amazing. The actual clients you guys serve, I know you guys serve a range of clients from, the average person who's just trying to get better at the brain to people who are peak performance in their business or athletes, etc. What are some of the most surprising things that you guys have found that people might find interesting, right? Like, for example, I'm sure there's CEOs that might kill it financially or in business, but they struggle with stress or sleep, right? Everyone has some sort of area they want to grow in. So what are some areas that you guys have been most fascinated to learn about that you think people would be interested to learn about how people turned it around or made shifts?
So we have a very, very deep passion for the first responder and veteran military population. We serve thousands of fire, EMT, police every single month. And so I think a lot of people don't necessarily look at first responders as performers, right? But those guys are every single day having to, perform, make sure that they don't have, use of force that's out of context, making sure that they can sleep, right? 99.9 responders that we work with, sleep is one of their number one goals. And it's not just because maybe they have interesting shift work that the average population doesn't have, but they have to shift, so specifically after being on guard all day long, even if it's subconscious, that now their brain's just they've trained themselves to be on high alert.
Yeah, my sister's similar to that. She was she worked in the hospital and as a nurse. She'd see trauma, like really intense trauma, accidents, bloody situations, and then has to go home and be loving to the husband and the kids, and then read a bedtime story, and then wake up at 6 a.m. and then do it again, and then a patient passes away that she built a relationship with, and then she goes to lunch with coworkers, and so it teaches you to emotionally sort of bounce around, and a lot of people, they don't develop the muscles to properly handle that. So I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Well, and to your point, first responders, they actually do really well responding. Where they don't do well is at home.
Yeah.
Right? These
Collateral
guys,
damage,
they're on their 5th marriage. They have no connection with their kids. They think their wife is annoying because she's maybe complaining about the spilled coffee that she had at noon. And to your point, they saw something really traumatic or heard something really traumatic at work. So how do they hold space for maybe their wife that's truly struggling with something at home or frustrated with the kids? So that's probably been one of my biggest surprises and wins, is how much we've helped, not with first responders and their symptoms, but with first responders and their households. Like, how do they show up and be the best fathers and husbands that they can possibly be? And that's been a huge win. So that's one I can think of.
I absolutely love that. And I know you said fathers and husbands. I mean, the women first responders that we work with, absolutely the same. That we have women come in, they're like, I am such a great first responder and I screamed at my kids. And, you know, but honestly, I think that people, we hear this time and time again. I go from 0 to 100, and then we look at their brain map. Their brain has never seen 0. Their brain has it does not know what 0 is. They're sitting at a hot 85 all the time. So now if you think about it, right, this is that visual form of grace. If you think about going 85 to 100, that's not actually a far jump. If you thought you were at 0, well, yeah, that would be a really far jump. What if we can teach your brain to sit at 20 or 30, right? Okay, well, now getting to 100 would be a very far jump. Now when you get frustrated, it's kind of, you thought you had this long of a wick, you actually have this long of a wick. What if we can give you more? That's the neurofeedback. Man, we've worked with so many cool populations. I'm thinking about, you know, and this is not, I would say, our bread and butter of what we work with, but I'm thinking about one specific CEO, owner, like top 1%er, like capital B's. He's incredible in business, right? That, you know, all the things, all the finances, and, you know, your wife hates you, and you, like, verbally told me these words, you know, I have no connection with my kids, those things. And that's, I would say, probably more of like a social component, that I know how to be a boss at work. I know how to get things done. I know how to be successful. Emotionally, it's very hard for me to experience empathy or to connect with people on that emotional social level, kind of that social EQ versus IQ. And neurofeedback is incredible for that. That is a part of the brain. Again, that is teachable, that is flexible, that is neuroplastic. And I actually ended up training this person's, his whole family, because his wife saw how he changed and literally came to me and was like, yes, one, thank you. And also, I want some of that.
Sign me
and
up.
Let me next, and then the kids, you know. And honestly, a lot of times with families, we treat full families. It will start with a kid. That parents are, you know, my kid has all these problems. You know, what can you do for them? We watch a child change, because children are not so in their head about things. You either see a kid change or you don't, right? That, you know, you see kids bouncing off the walls to being calm and focused and in control of their emotions. And then parents are like, wait a second, if you can do this, how can I benefit?
Right. What's the most common hindrance or challenge people have in the brain that they don't know? I'm sure you guys have seen thousands, or if not, you know, multiple thousands. But what's the most common thing that most people are unaware of, and most people have either a deficiency or a dominant issue in that they don't know?
I would say the overactive, the way that we see it through the lens of being a neurospecialist, is called something called peak alpha, or fast processing speed. Mm-hmm. People will think that they just, you know, are overthinking, or that they're distracted, or that they're depressed. And then we just look at this number, and that number reflects everything, right? If your processing speed is so fast, good luck not struggling with analysis paralysis, or ruminating, or overthinking, or feeling ultimately stuck, because your brain is so powerful. It's like being on that Ferrari, but having absolutely no brake. So you're asking your car to stop and the brake doesn't work. Good luck. A lot of people don't know what a processing speed is. And so we love getting to educate people, not just on the speed you're going, right? You could be going 100 miles an hour, but how does your engine function? Because you can have a Ferrari and you can have a Kia, it's two completely different experiences of a drive. And that's the way that we see brains, right? There are people that have faster, more powerful brains, also is associated typically with higher IQ. They're pretty like logical, linear, can outrun circles, or they can run circles around people cognitively. There's also people that have a little bit of a slower brain, and they're extraordinary when it comes to creativity and holding space and thinking outside the box and creating these beautiful brands, or, you know, creating an entrepreneurial need for society. But you have to understand your brain so that you know how to take care of it more specifically. Yeah. So I think the processing speed, peak alpha, all of that is something that nobody, if you're probably listening to this, you might not know about it at all. That's one of my favorite things I like to educate on.
I totally agree with you. I think it's sleep. That I have people come in, sleep is nowhere on their symptom list. I look at their brain, I'm like, tell me about your sleep. Sleep great. Never slept better. I'm like, all right, let's talk about, latency. How long does it take to fall asleep? Oh, a couple hours, get 4 hours a night, but I feel great. Never felt better. I'm like, okay. Or people, I could sleep for days.
Noted.
Yeah. Best sleep ever. And I have people who, I could sleep 15 hours.
I crash. I hit the pillow.
Gone. Could sleep till the next day. Never would wake up. Sleep through alarms. I don't think people know what good sleep is. Also, sleep, if you can master anything in the world, sleep is the key to longevity. Sleep is the key to healing. Sleep should be your superpower if you can make it that. But when it's our baseline, we don't know, right? That I honestly, people come in and they actually do think that they sleep great because that's how they've always slept. It is what it is. We hear that from first responders. Sleep just fine. 2 hours a night, but I feel fine. You just don't know what you don't know. And then I'm 10, 15 sessions in of neurofeedback. I have people come in who told me they have the best sleep ever. And they're like, who am I? Once your sleep starts to get dialed, we also do a lot of education around sleep hygiene, about circadian rhythm, things like that, because people were staring at our phones until the minute we fall asleep at night. And, that's overstimulating our brain, all these different, we look at our phone the minute we wake up. So we do education around that as well. Sleep is, if it can be your only biohack that you do, work on sleep.
What's the key to perfect sleep?
Sleep, just like health, we want it to be a silver bullet. It is a puzzle. Okay. So if we're talking about falling asleep at night, turn your phone off. You're not looking at a screen 2 hours before you go to bed. That's going to help your brain start to shift and down regulate versus up regulating your brain and then expecting it to fall asleep. That's the key to falling asleep. If we want to be able to stay asleep at night, now this also comes down to neurology. If you have what's called beta spindling in your brain, which a lot of kind of high achieving CEO fast brains have, your sleep pattern should look very smooth and very slow. It's awake wave activity interjected within your sleep pattern. So when people come in, I wake up during the night 5 or 6 times and I'm like ready to go, beep, awake.
That's me.
Yeah.
I sleep deep and then I wake up alert and then I got to go back to sleep. But that's every night.
We're going to see that in your brain pattern. We can train that out, that your brain can be trained, right? So first off, your brain waking up 5 times during the night, that's dysregulating your sleep pattern, correct, right? So I bet you don't wake up feeling as rested, maybe hitting snooze a couple times, feeling a little bit foggy in the morning. So sleep is kind of a multi-process step. One, training your brain, also the things that we do at home. It's very easy. I've done it before, right? I know the rules and I'm just going to check my email one more time before I go to sleep. I'm just going to send Rachel a quick text or, whatever that is. Yeah. I know not to. It's so easy. So that also comes down to discipline.
Right. Yeah. What's easy to do is also easy not to do. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You also have to have a healthy dream life. I think we undervalue how powerful your dreams are. Most people don't even remember their dreams.
Yeah.
There's so much information that you can get around your dreams, telling you about how you're doing with your stress, just listening to what your body is telling you. But if you are not actually actively remembering your dreams, then you're not getting into the deepest stages of sleep in the first place that you need to be in. Aura rings. We love Aura rings, right? Because it's another objective way to actually measure what's going on. And the Aura ring, that is a great way to see, am I in a pretty well-balanced state of sleep, right? Because you're going to hit the latency and the REM and the deep in a really desirable order.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about when it comes to sleep in terms of, you mentioned turning off the cell phone. I know I had a coach one time who told me about a 3-2-1 rule where it's like, 3 hours before sleep, stop working, 2 hours before sleep, stop eating or drinking, and then 1 hour before sleep, no screens. That was one thing. But is there any other practices in terms of applicable things people can do to help optimize their sleep?
I mean, one little thing, truly, you guys, like, go put your phone just not super close to your physical body. So many people just sleep with their phone right next to their bed charging. Ooh, you are just baking yourself and your brain if you're just sitting next to an outlet.
Are there waves or outlets that affect your brain?
EMFs are real things. Like,
or at least put it on airplane.
Put it on airplane.
That's what I do. Yeah.
Minimum put it on
But
airplane.
even if it's even if it's plugged in, though, it's not as great. Where you can just go put it in your bathroom, and then if you need to go invest in a real alarm clock, because that's my main reason I need to sleep next to my phone is my alarm, then just go get a regular alarm clock. But that is a really simple one. Also, as far as sleep, blue lights and just light in general, it really is important to have a very dark room. So I'm crazy. We just stayed in a hotel because we were speaking at a biohacking conference, and there was like 15 little lights around the room. My husband and I are like putting towels over things, like hanging my clothes over some. Those disrupt your brain because your brain actually sees that subconsciously too, right? It can see the different lights, and so it attunes into that.
What happens in the brain when it sees light during sleep?
Like Angie was saying, your beta is going to stay more activated.
Stimulated.
So you don't want your
ready.
brain shifting into beta because then it's ready. It's like, wait, is it time? Is it time to focus? Is it time to go? And so you think that my eyes are closed, but your brain can perceive what's going on around it even with your eyes closed. So you don't want your brain in a beta state while you're trying to sleep.
So it's almost like your brain needs you to signal it on what to do. And so many of us don't necessarily signal it. I love the reference too you guys mentioned of like shifting, because most people, especially entrepreneurs, right? They probably have the hardest time because all day long, they're revving all day long, 9 to 6. It's so hard to like from 6 to 9, just like, you just revved it up for 6, 7, 8 hours. You add coffee to the mix, stimulus, business, whatever, employees, hiring, firing, you guys know the drill. And then after that, you got to like decompress and do nothing, right? So it's very hard if you don't have some sort of conscious mechanism to rep that muscle.
And for some people, it's easier than others, right?
Sure.
That, their brain, naturally, or because they've trained it shifts better. But again, the brain is absolutely teachable. We can teach it to have self-regulation and to be able to do that. And for some reason, we just expect it to be able to do that on its own, and it just can't.
How about diet and nutrition? How does that affect the brain in terms of what you guys have seen from your research?
I mean, so many different things, right? That, caffeine is a big one. That know yourself and know your brain. Rachel's husband the other night, right when they got to California, they were at night, went to a coffee shop, and Don got like a quad latte and something. It's like 7 p.m.
Shout out Don.
Shout out freaking Don Lambert. There's no way. That would ruin my life. I would quite literally be awake for the next like 20 years. So one, know yourself. Also though, when people say, I could still fall asleep, that says something about your sleep. You should not be able to have a quad latte and still fall asleep. There's no way. So couple different things, but sleep is also compounding interest. This is another big one that I hear from people. I'll just catch up on the weekends. Saturday, I'll get 12 hours of sleep. Every other night of the week, I'll get 3 or 4. Sleep is compounding interest. It is not one large deposit. You should be getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep every single night. 9 on the, upper end if you're one of those people who can hit it hard, 7 as a minimum. If you are getting less than that, you're missing cycles of sleep. You need to be in deep sleep, REM sleep, light sleep. You need a certain amount of each of those things. If you're familiar at all with like Chinese medicine, there's actually areas of your body and of your brain that only open up and valves in your brain that decompress during certain cycles. So if you are missing those cycles, like, well, I don't go to bed till midnight, your brain is not releasing toxins that it actually needs to. That will create long-term issues. So great, you're 35, it's not affecting you yet. And when you're 65, now you have all of these cognitive issues and are confused why they're happening. That started 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard about that as it relates to dementia. People are saying like there's new studies coming out that poor sleep for decades.
Alzheimer's, dementia, all
yeah.
of these different degenerative issues are crazy, rampant on the rise, and we're confused by it. We are the most overstimulated, overworked, overstressed culture all of these things are tied to illness, right? Are tied to cancer, are tied to degenerative. So absolutely, I truly believe that sleep is the best hack, that if you can hack your sleep and you can figure out how to do it well, which you can, it's going to take work, but you can, that's what you should be doing. That's what you should be focusing on.
What about in terms of nutrition for the brain, in terms of downside, like things like sugar, right? Things like this. What have you guys seen in terms of patterns there, or just basic foods? I know obviously water is going to be phenomenal for the brain and body, but what are some other things that you guys recommend for people, whether it be brain food or otherwise, to help optimize?
We're huge on whole foods in general, right? You listen to any of the podcasters in the world, like they are going to talk about a whole food diet and how critical that is. And we are in complete agreement with that. Yeah. We in America have such a highly processed diet. It's incredible. Like you go to Trader Joe's, 90% of the stuff in there is processed, yet we think that Trader Joe's is healthy. Right now, yes, you can find some good stuff at Trader Joe's, but you have to just be prioritizing whole food. And really that just comes down to straight discipline. With how much Angie and I travel, I feel like I live on an airplane. I am going to make sure that I plan and pack some stuff to eat on the airplane. Maybe it's just some chicken breast. Maybe it's some fruit. Maybe it's some veggies and some hummus that I made. It doesn't have to be complicated, but prioritizing whole foods above everything else is critical. As far as just some of our basic brain staples, I mean, berries are huge, huge, huge for antioxidants. Salmon, broccoli. I actually do believe that coffee in moderation is good for your brain. So
a little bias there.
It depends who you listen to. Some people say, no, like make sure you get some good, mold tested quality coffee and you're not drinking 15 cups. But coffee actually has quite a bit of antioxidants in it. So we also on our Instagram are very educational around diet and nutrition and getting rid of dyes. God bless, like make sure you are looking at the ingredients, and especially if you're feeding your kids dyes, red 40, yellow 5, blue 15, just kidding, but all of these different dyes, it's so harmful. And there's a lot of research that's starting to come out on dyes, especially this whole movement of, make America healthy again. You will 100% notice a better emotional regulation of your child and yourself if you just cut dyes out of your system. So
what do they do?
I mean, they're linked to distractibility, ADHD, emotional dysregulation.
They're literally toxic.
I mean, you're having your body have to digest dyes, which if you think about it, it's just artificial coloring. They have them in Ruffles, for God's sake. Like, eat a better chip. There's a lot of other chips that you can be eating. So making sure that your brain isn't having to work on overdrive because you're fueling it with absolute trash.
What are parts of the brain in terms of what they actually do? I know early on you talked about the anatomy of it, but can you zoom in one more time for people interested in, the different parts of the brain and then the functions that they serve?
Totally.
High level.
Yeah, high level. So I would say probably not the most important, every part of your brain is important. Your prefrontal cortex is your CEO of your brain. All your decision-making center, it helps regulate your brain. So truly, I would say that one of the biggest parts of your brain is your prefrontal cortex. Your occipital area is your occipital area is like body control. You have vision in the back of your head. There's different trauma areas of the brain. Your temporal lobe in the back is where more attachment style trauma. We're going to see things like that. Emotion. There's kind of a general understanding of like right brain versus left brain. Sure. The right side of your brain is more feeling, emotion, attachment. The left side of your brain is more linear learning, mathematics, logic. That is true. And I'm more left brain versus right brain. To be a truly optimized person, you want both sides of your brain working pretty strongly. But when you meet people, you definitely meet people who probably have more wave activity on one or the other, which is why you have, CEOs, more intense, linear, kind of more intensive people versus, kind of your feelers and your artists and your creatives are probably more right side. So that's a little bit more, kind of a general overview. Memory is in certain areas. Visual spatial in your frontal lobe, but on the left side. So you can see there's a lot of different areas.
And when people do these sort of brain maps, they're able to see all these different parts of the brain. Does it focus on one part, or is it a sort of holistic view of the brain? And what does it look like? What are things that are picked up if people are say they're watching this and they're interested, they want to book a call with you guys, they want to learn more. What can they expect with, a part 1 brain map, just to contextualize it for people?
One of my favorite things about a brain map is it's like a fingerprint in a tapestry of their history. What are they really good at? What are their blind spots, right? Because ultimately we want to optimize the person that is sitting in front of us or the person that is doing our remote program. So again, the beautiful thing about a brain map is we're looking at not just the power in the brain, so how much or how little brain wave activity is there, but we're looking at the locations that that's happening, because one brainwave might be better functioning if it's higher on the right hemisphere versus the left hemisphere. So location optimization is critical, as well as we're looking at the communication and the timing that the brain has, right? You don't want your right hemisphere to be speaking Spanish to your left hemisphere that's speaking English, right? They are going to have troubles communicating with one another. You want them to be in really good sync with each other. So there's so many complexities that we are working on the back end to help our clients optimize, which is why we're really, really, really big on custom tailored treatment plans. But what I love most is just the power of validation. When you come do a brain map, and a lot of people are still skeptical. They're like, I don't know about these girls. I don't know about brain mapping and neurofeedback. Why don't you tell me what you see on my map? Great. Up for the challenge. Love it. Because in that meeting, we get to show you like, man, you really struggle, not just falling asleep, but you cannot stay asleep. I bet you wake up 3 or 4 times at night, just ready to go. We can see that versus somebody that maybe just wakes up early in the morning and they can't shut it down. We can see somebody that has gone through a traumatic incident, let's say. Like, for example, we worked with this first responder agency, and there was 2 people that had to arrive first on the scene at a critical incident. Well, guess what? They both had trauma. They both had sleep issues. They both were having different symptoms that were associated with that exact same incident. One was completely dissociative, so a different style of PTSD, and the other one was hypervigilant, on alert, all over the place. So why did those 2 people that witnessed the same thing respond so differently? Well, their brains are different. Right. And so this is why you have to understand and look at the brain so you can understand the person's story. And that's the great thing about a brain map is it's objective. It's data driven. This is not like us telling you about a symptom that you maybe struggle with that you're communicating to us.
Or a one size fits all.
It's just a pattern. It's a pattern. And we know that there is science-based evidence that is related to this tapestry of a pattern that we see on those brain maps. And that's the beauty of having that information in the first place.
I love it. And if someone wants to, learn more or do something remote, can they do it in person? Can they do it remote? How long does it take? High level, what's the context on it if people want to get more information?
Thankfully, we are not limited to our physical clinics, but some people do like the in-person experience. That we are in Denver, Dallas, and Oklahoma, but we are not limited to just space. We have our fully remote program where we can actually ship our clients out hardware. So we're shipping you out both a remote neurofeedback headband as well as a cap to do the initial baseline EEG. We can do a brain map sitting anywhere in the world. We have clients all over Dubai, South Africa, you name it. And we actually work with a neurospecialist virtually so we can get that data. And then we have our own app. So one of our favorite things to do is start with initial consultations. Because like I said, everybody's different. Everybody has their story. We like to learn about that story. So starting off with our team with an initial consultation so that we can really empower you in your next steps.
Very cool. And who is somebody that this should be for versus somebody who it's not for?
This is for everybody. If you have a brain, we have people who just want to do the brain map. I just want the information. I want that, baseline scan. Great, let's do it. If you are somebody who struggles with sleep, let's do it. ADD, let's do it. If you had a brain injury 20 years ago and you're like, maybe it's affecting me now, maybe it's not, let's do it. So truly, if you have a brain and if you want that brain to be optimized, neurofeedback's for you.
I love it. And then before we wrap up here, because this is really good, juicy stuff, I want to ask if you guys had to give each of you guys a 60-second piece of advice for somebody who wants to optimize their brain, whether they're interested in, doing something about it, taking that first step, or maybe they just want to at home first try something practical before they, set up a consultation or learn a little bit more about what you guys have to offer. What would be your best advice to optimize brain function and brain health? Each of you guys, if you had 60 seconds based on thousands of, studies and research.
You make 35,000 choices a day. And those choices matter so much, right? They can change everything about the trajectory of your day or your life. You also have power over the choices that you speak. Between the choices that you make and the words that you speak, literally you can shift everything. And so we are very, very, very big believers on being very specific with the words that you speak. If you tell yourself you're going to have a bad day, or my anxiety, I cannot tell you how many times we hear this. Well, I am anxious, my anxiety. That is not your anxiety to claim, nor is it for you to keep, right? Like, you might be struggling with anxiety and we absolutely want to help you with that. But if you claim that, then that becomes a part of your cellular system, right? So how are you going to get rid of anxiety if it's yours to keep in the first place? So people need to get very, very specific with the words that you're speaking to yourself and your friends and everything like that, because it literally changes everything about the energy that you exude. So
Yeah.
words that you speak.
I love that. I had a coach one time. I know I'm bringing up all these references, but it's true. I used to have a pattern of saying, "Oh man, I can't believe I messed." Like, say you mess up on something. "Oh, I should have done that. Oh, that was dumb. I should have done that." You know, that self-talk that we all have. And he stopped me one time and he goes, "Remember, your subconscious can't take a joke."
Yep.
Your subconscious, yeah. So if you say, "Oh, I'm so stupid," or "I'm an idiot," or, you know, with all these things we habitually do, like involuntarily, your subconscious will store it. It doesn't know the discrepancy between, well, we're saying that in jest. And so we, you know, the strongest need in the human psyche is the need to remain consistent with who we believe we are.
That's right.
And if we're creating this identity, it's like, how do we speak words of defeat and then expect to be victorious? Right?
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
Amen.
So mine would be, and this has nothing to do with neurofeedback specifically, you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So this is going to be kind of an unpopular opinion. It's okay to audit your circle, right? That if you're somebody, I can't figure out why I'm not more successful. I can't figure out why I'm not more motivated. Look around you. Who are you spending the most time with? Because the 5 people that you spend the most time with, you are the average of those people. And as we have gotten older, as we've gotten more dialed, as we've gotten more focused, we have less friend options for girls' nights. And at first we kind of saw that as a loss. I was like, oh man, you know what's going on? Why don't we have as many friendships? Things like that. I mean, honestly, the higher up you get, the quieter it gets. Altitude is deeply uncomfortable. Learn to live in that uncomfortability and audit your circle. That's the best advice that I can give, because you affect them. And if more, they affect you.
Quality over quantity. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, guys, where can people, if they want to get in touch, find out more and get in touch? We'll put some links down below. But where can people find you?
Well, you got to go follow us at Brain Code Centers. That's a big one. And if you want to learn more and take a deep dive into research or what we do, braincodecenters.com. But number one, just come schedule a consultation. Angie and I actually still do many of the consultations. So you might get to meet with one of us or some of our amazing clinical team. And yeah, we can learn more about you and how we can help you reach your goals.
Very cool. Well, thank you guys so much for being on the show. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and put some questions down below about the brain. Who knows? We may just do another episode right here soon. Till then, live strong, live with passion, and check out the links below to follow Angie, Rachel, and the Brain Code Centers. We'll see you guys next time.